What's going on, everybody? This your boy Bill Mehari here, represent MehariNation Sports Podcast here on a cloudy day here in the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Salute to the entire LDBC. Salute to the greater basketball community. I'm just gonna go on live for probably about half an hour. I have a basketball tournament I have to attend to in a couple hours, so I promise I won't take anybody else's time here. But I just wanted to just talk. My inner frustrations about today's NBA. Coming from a guy that studies the game very avidly, like I do, I get disgusted with a lot of things that occurred in today's game that I wasn't really disgusted with growing up in the 90s into the early 2000s too. Now, let me start my premise on that. Let's see who's in the chat here. Shakita Dow, what's up, sis? How you doing? King Louis, what's going on, brother? How you doing, man? Thank you for coming in. Dude, my OG brother, salute, man. Thanks for coming in. Now, I was born in 1992, so I'm 26 years old. Now, I was way too young for the first three-peat Chicago Bulls team. I grew up around the second three-peat team with Ron Harper, Jordan Pippen, Rodman, Coach Kerr, those guys. Now, the thing that I get particularly frustrated with in today's NBA is, it's just that nobody in the league is allowed to play defense anymore. And it really frustrates me. Now, to understand that, you have to go back to the 90s when the NBA wanted to have more scoring to bring in more of a casual fan base to the league. Because at that time, the NBA was becoming more globally famous. You know what I'm saying? Now, the first thing one of the things that they did was they took away hand checking in 94. They took away zone defenses where they basically call the illegal defense violation. Now, to understand what the illegal defense violation is essentially where you on defense, you can't double team another offensive player without the basketball. So essentially, you can't double team a specific area or one particular player from a different spot on the floor. You have to physically double team a person with the basketball. Once that rule was kind of implemented, what it essentially did was it took away zone defenses, where you can't play any kind of 2-3 zone or one or basically a boxing one. You can still run those zone defenses to a certain extent, but you do it strategically. Now, in reference to the NBA Finals this year between the Raptors and the Warriors, the thing that the Raptors did very well was they instituted a boxing one defense where they essentially double teamed anytime Curry had the basketball in his hands. Now that's just another recent kind of example. But the thing that I don't like is that you can't bump into guards. You can't put your hands on them to try to control their movements while they're bringing the ball up the court. So essentially, you got no choice but to try to square them up and try to catch them with something, on defense. And I get really mad at that because what has happened is it has allowed a lot of more open court scoring. You know what I'm saying? And I really get frustrated with that because, you can't play any kind of defense. No defense whatsoever. So, with that, you normally will see a lot of scores in today's game, probably over 100 points or something like that. A lot of open threes. And let me say this about the three-point shots, too. The thing that I get frustrated about all this three-point shooting is that teams jack up threes when you know that shooting all of them threes in a game is not always going to get you to come back in it. Now, it looks good when they go in, but when you're missing 10 or 12 threes or 15 threes in a row, I mean, let's be real. You got to switch up the strategy or something, Now, I don't necessarily blame the Warriors for bringing that kind of style of play. That kind of style of play was implemented back when D'Antoni coaches Phoenix Suns teams back in the mid-2000s. That was the team that was more of the 7 seconds or less offense. Hold on 1 second, guys. Okay, I'm back. Now, the thing that really, rakes my nerves about, with that offensive style is that, Dan Tony's teams disregard defense. And so when you disregard defense and look to try to outscore your opponents every single time, it's kind of essentially ruins the flow of the game. So you kind of just disregarding that side of the basketball, which I really rebel and hate against. I basically was coached to play, half court defense because my high school team back then, we weren't necessarily a more of a full court fast break type team. We were more of a controlled half court offense team that tries to slow the game down and try to make you play a slow tempo game. And some teams don't like to play that way because a lot of teams have superior athletes that love to run up and down the court to get, highlight dunks, layups, or things of that sort. But the thing that I really just don't like about what today's NBA is that they always jack up threes so many times, and it really rules the flow of the game. Listen, the 3-point shot is fun. It's very beneficial for the game, but it's also can be a double-edged sword because if you keep missing all of them threes, then you're putting yourself way down in the 8 ball there. Because myself as a 3-point shooter, I thrive on open threes. But I understand if I take too many, that takes my team out of the flow of the game. So I try to, not take as many as I should to try to make sure to pass it to the open man or just pass it to another teammate and just keep the offense flowing. Now, with today's game, there's so many players that believe that they're outside shooters when they're actually taking their shots. They're doing the defense a favor by taking those kind of shots because they know it's a low percentage shot because you're not a great 3-point shooter. And that's where you have to use your smarts. You have to use your IQ to understand what the defense is giving you. And I feel like in today's game, with the exception of some of the stars who are very smart players, they don't take advantage of what is given to them. Now, another thing. The thing with basketball today for me is, the thing is, and let me do something real quick. There you go. There you go, Shakita. You got yourself a wrench. Now, the thing that I always have a huge problem with in terms of today's NBA player is that sometimes they don't know how to handle that kind of level of criticism very well. Not in terms of their out of the outside stuff there, because that's not our business. And I will never, ever judge a player on their outside of activity unless they commit any crimes. But I judge a player based on what they're doing on the court and how they're handling, how they approach themselves to the game and what kind of decisions they make on the floor. Now, one of my favorite players in today's game which is a very tough stretch for me, is Steph Curry. But I will tell you that sometimes Steph Curry doesn't use his mind a lot when in terms of shot selection. Now, in going back into that game 6 against the Raptors, they were basically down a point. All he had to do was just drive the ball to the basket and then draw a foul. But instead, he basically took a tough contested three with 2 guys on him. And that's just not smart basketball. With the great star players like a Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Isaiah Thomas or Magic Johnson or Kareem, you know what I mean? Those are scorers that will basically look at you and look at the situation and say, okay, we don't need a 3 right now. What we need to do is work the ball inside. Now, the greatest clutch moment for me, in my opinion, in my basketball intellect, was obviously the 87 finals in Game 4 when Magic Johnson hit the hook shot over Kevin McHale. Now, he could have taken a tough contested jump shot, but what he did was he saw that McHale had switched out to Magic. When Magic saw that, he realized he's got an advantage against him because McHale doesn't move well out in the perimeter. So what he did was he set him up, dribbled with his right hand, then he basically turned right, straight to the middle of the floor, jumped in the air, and did the hook shot, and it went down through. And that was pretty much decided the series and the championship. Now, in the 1998 NBA Finals, which is one of my all-time favorite, which is my number one all-time moment in NBA history, Michael basically worked his way to get to that moment. Because after John Stockton nailed the three to get themselves a 3-point lead with about 40 seconds to go in the game, Michael Jordan got the inbound pass, drove the ball right to hit a tough layup to cut the lead to 1. Right. So what he knew was that the Jazz are going to try to look to get the ball to Karl Malone on the left block against Dennis Rodman, their pet play that they used the entire series. Michael was well aware of that. So they ran the same, left block screen, basically left block floppy pick play where Hornacek sets the screen and basically creates an isolation play to get the ball inside of Malone. But Michael was smart enough to know where that ball was going to go to. So when Malone catching the ball in the inside of the paint there, he didn't see Michael Jordan coming. So Michael quickly, in his haste, went for the steal and got the ball. And then obviously he knew he was going to take the last shot. So he basically knew that he didn't have to rush. He had all the time. And then executed one of the most filthiest ankle breakers you'll ever see in NBA Finals history. I mean, he legitimately crossed over Brian Russell on that crossover. Now, I know there's a lot of casual trolls that will say, "Oh, Michael pushed off." Well, that's no push off to me, brother. That's a clean crossover all the way. You just are envious of the fact of how Michael did it, and that was it. They won the title, but Michael played the percentages and played the situation to a T, and he got the job done. Muhammad is the one. Salute, brother. Thank you for joining me, man. I feel like in today's game, the big man is not featured as much, mostly in maybe just like a fade pick and roll for a 3-point shot. But to me, a lot of big men in this day and age don't know how to use post moves. They don't know how to use counter moves, that they both basically learn more just how to shoot or create crossover moves, which are fancy moves, but they don't know how to essentially use, their feet and use their size to create post shots inside. And the art of the post game in today's big men is lost because it's not being taught enough in basically with little kids. Okay, I'm gonna explain why. Because in basically back then in the game in basketball back then, you basically were taught if you're maybe 6'11" or 7 foot, you're basically going to be a big man. So you learn how to get on the low block, get squared up, get low, catch the ball in the paint, and then learn how to square up to the target, use your hook shot, or use some counter moves there. My favorite big guy of all time is Akeem Olajuwon. You know what I mean? I was blessed to meet Akeem Olajuwon back in 2015 in Los Angeles, the most nicest athlete you'll ever meet. I mean, I was blessed to meet probably one of the greatest centers to ever play the game, and he's an African native too, from Nigeria. I'm also Eritrean too, so there's a bit of an African connection there. But the thing with Olajuwon was that a lot of the soccer players have good footwork there. So when Olajuwon started playing basketball, he was basically had to learn the game on the fly. But when you essentially have good footwork there from playing all those soccer games, where you basically learn how to kick, pivot, and use your feet, that's already an advantage for you right there. And then when he implemented that to his post game, I mean, he was much more of an unstoppable force, I'm going to get to that, Mama. One. Hold on, bro. So the thing is, when Olajuwon started using the turnaround jumper and using the hook shot there, he was basically an unstoppable force, And, a lot of these big men in today's game, like the Joel Embiid, and maybe not DeMarcus Cousins per se, because he does post up in his own way. But I'm talking about in terms of guys who just stick behind the 3-point line a lot. I tend to believe that the art of the post game is a lost science now, and it's not what it used to be. Now, that's my take on that. Now I'm going to get into what Muhammad is the one just said. He said he pushed off. No, sorry, Muhammad is the one. I love you, OG, but sorry, bro. That was no push-off, all right? Michael crossed him clean, all clean. He just slid on the floor and just wondered what the hell just happened. Listen, Brian Russell, let's be real. Even Brian Russell on his best defensive night could have never stopped Michael Jordan, okay? He toasted him the entire game and pretty much the whole entire series. That 97 through 98 series. Listen, this wasn't the first time he did this to him. Remember the 1997 NBA Finals? In the first game, Michael Jordan caught the ball on the left side of the floor, and Brian Russell was basically guarding him again. So what he did was he dribbled right, and then he basically gave him a little sort of step move to the left. And then he kind of over dribbled a bit, but Brian Russell went for the steal, which is an absolute no-no. He basically gave Jordan the opening after he went left, pulled up to the left side and shot the ball in his face, you know? And Brian Russell played the defensive wrong. He should have just stayed square, should have stayed on his feet, not try to go for the steal, and then just played him straight out. And if he makes a shot over some good defense, then hey, give all credit to him. But no, that 98 one, absolutely not. He did not push him off. You will never make me change my mind on that. Sorry. I know there's still a lot of people that believe that Jordan may have pushed him off on that crossover, but that's a load of crap. It's not a push off, bro. That was a clean, total crossover. He never extended the arm. He basically used the arm to set Brian Russell up and never even pushed him back. Never did. Go back and watch the replay. Man, I know how people is sometimes though, man, but it's always good to just, chop it up on the old days. I'll tell you this though, man, the NBA Finals back then when I was growing up, there were some good series that I saw. That basically when the Bulls faced the Jazz in 97 and 98, that was a really good basketball. If Malone would have made his free throws, if he would have not shot the ball poorly in Game 5 of that 97 series, who knows? The Jazz may have won their first title. Or if Malone didn't shoot badly in the first 2 games in Utah, who knows? They would have maybe won the first 2 games in Utah. But, that's all near and there. And if that 3-point shot that Howard Isley made wasn't waved off by referee Dick Bavetta, that was one of the worst calls I've ever seen since the Hugh Hollins BS back in Game 5 of the 94 Eastern Conference semifinals against the Knicks. As a Bulls fan, that still pisses me off to this day. Listen, I know Hugh Hollins is dead. God bless his soul, but fuck Hugh Hollins for that stuff, bro. That is one of the worst calls I've ever seen in my life, man. Bar none. You know what I'm saying? But, the other thing that's kind of changed with, in today's NBA is that, a lot of players, take so much time off to heal their bodies or something like that. They always take extended amount of games to recuperate themselves. While Michael Jordan, after he came back, didn't miss one. After he came back out of his first retirement in 95, he made all 17 games and played all 82 games for the final 3 championships. He kept himself in shape. He committed himself to staying in shape for the long run because he knew his team needed him when it counted the most. And so I feel like today's game, with all the new advanced technology in health, fitness, and sports science, I would say is utilized, in the way it should be, but it could be done more to help these athletes play, full season. I always believe that if you're fully 100%, if you're still able to run effectively, and shoot effectively, just go out there and play and give it your best. Allen Iverson, one of the most toughest players in the NBA. I'm telling you, man, if you go back and watch that whole 2001 season when he won the MVP, he played through every single injury you can imagine, through sprained wrist, brain wrist, bruised tailbone, partially dislocated left shoulder. I mean, you just got to go in there. You just got to go and research it for yourself, And the thing is, man, a lot of these players, they don't play through a lot of those nicking injuries. Now, when it comes to like broken bones or an ACL injury or something like that, that's a totally different ballgame. And I will never dispute on that, But I'm talking about, when it's time to play, when it's time to, show up in the big moment, like in the NBA playoffs or finals, and when you got to strap it up and play. Some of these guys, though, bro, when the moment is too big for them, they shy away. And I really have been disappointed with a lot of these players when it was time to put it all on the line, they shy away, and I don't respect that. 88 Sports Talk, how you doing, brother? It's good to see you, my man. Yeah, he said these players nowadays, they don't play through nothing. Right, I agree. I definitely agree. I think that, a lot of these players, some of them, I always feel that there's a perception that some of these players feel entitled that, listen, I'm the star player. Why do I need to play through injury? I can rest whenever I want to. I'll be ready for the playoffs. But, fate does weird things. And these basketball guys, bro, they sometimes can punish you if you're either not taking care of yourself in the off season, or if you're just not, committed yourself to win it, And I feel like, today's players, and if today's stars played back then, I don't know if they would have had the same kind of production than they would here today. Now let's take a guy like a James Harden, who averages probably 28 points a game, I believe. Let me check the stats of him real quick. Let me take up on my phone. Because I tend to think that, with James Harden, he will tend to, he tends to over dribble a lot, and tries to dribble about 7 to 8 times before he gets a shot together. And, you can't win that way, especially during the playoffs. Kobe Bryant said that previously. If you watch some of the critiques by Kobe, he would tell you that James Harden, as good as a player that he is when it comes to scoring, sometimes you can't win by basically playing a lot of isolation basketball. It's not going to lead you anywhere, Now, let me pull up the stats of James Harden here as soon as my phone is under control. There you go. James Harden. There you go. All right. There we go. Now, career statistics. There you go. This year, he averaged about 36 points a game, but career-wise, near 24 points a game. So obviously, his numbers went up in a big way. But when it came down to playoff time, his numbers dipped a bit. But again, it's essentially on the style of play he chooses. Now, he dribbles about 7 to 8 times to get a shot off. Now, he's the master of creating contact after the shot. Falling back, fading to the side, all that. And I get ticked off at that because he's basically trying to lead into you and he creates the contact. And that is so freaking frustrating. And sometimes I feel like he sometimes puts his leg out to try to create even more contact. And it really just drives me crazy, I think that if you start readjusting that rule, that the playing the verticality rule, I think the game would probably be much more efficiently better, I would say, But, when Harden takes about 7 to 8 dribbles to get off a shot, that kind of tells me that, that your shot selection is great. It's good, but it could be better. And sometimes he has to be a bit smarter about the shots he's taking most times, though. And specifically, during the postseason, when the defenses are basically, a bit more better, sometimes you gotta be smart of what the defense is giving you, and sometimes you gotta pass out the rock a little bit. I know it's a kind of a critique of what James Harden does, though, but I'm trying to illustrate the point that a lot of the isolation ball that a lot of these players, sometimes will do can work at certain times. But if you're trying to use it to try to win games or let's say win a championship, it's not necessarily going to win that. You're not going to win much championship that way, So that's how I feel about that, So, and also another thing too, there's no physicalness to the game now. You always got to check your back on these rules of the flagrant foul, because even if a simple push or maybe just a little accidental bump, and they'll consider that a flagrant foul. And I have a huge issue with that because, back then, a playoff foul is essentially you try to go for the block shot, but you also try to, rough up the guy a little bit to try to send the message that when you get to the paint, no easy layups. Now you can't even do that anymore. There's not many enforcers like that in the NBA anymore because the role of the enforcer in basketball is extinct. You know, guys like Charles Oakley, the Rick Mahorns of the world, and others like Anthony Mason. You know what I mean? So my take is, my take is as soon as I move it to the room a second. There we go. My take is that, sometimes it's always okay to allow these players to, play a little bit more physical basketball, but keep it under control. And so if you let the physicalness, get out of hand, then you know what, that's on the referee's fault. And I feel like the referees are being handicapped to these kind of rules that the NBA is trying to set for them to try to make sure the NBA is a bit more PC control. I mean, you can't even talk trash, and you can't even say much at all because these referees right now, they're so PC. They try to limit so much communication between the players and the coach that it's actually disturbing to me. And I really have a problem with that. So that's just how I take about this, though, man. That's just how I feel about that most times. Coming from a guy that researches the game very thoroughly and looking at all the great basketball teams of all great teams that won championships, that haven't won championships. I always ask myself these questions: could today's players, coexist, in the style of play of the 90s, the 80s, and the 70s? If you ask me, I would say no. But it's not an easy topic to discuss about because some players like LeBron James maybe could play in the 90s. His style of play could work in the 80s, but in the 70s, who knows? With the physicalness and with Curry, always shimmying, shaking, after he makes his three, a lot of players in the 90s will not allow you to do that because then if you do that, if you try to showboat in front of them, you're going to get dealt with. And so, those are the things as a basketball historian I tend to think about too, As a basketball guy that, researches the game all my life and actually physically plays the game, I tend to have a different take on things. But I'm still, at the end of the day, I still enjoy the game that I love because it's allowed me to enjoy life and allow me to research new things about the game itself too. Different moves, different, shot forms, different strategies, things to that sort. Because unlike boxing, you can't duck the best teams or you can't duck the best players because you're going to have to face them somewhere down the line. Unlike in boxing, But that's just how I feel about that, though, guys. So I got to go ahead and wrap it up because I got to get going to a basketball tournament, though. But I appreciate all the people that was here in the chat, though, man, showing me love and support, though, man. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. You know what I'm saying? And I hope, and I probably will continue this conversation, but add a little boxing into the mix, though, too. So, but wish me luck tonight. I got a Special Olympic basketball tournament. The tip-off is going to be at 6 o'clock, though, too. So I got to get my stuff going on and start traveling up there right now to St. Paul. And then we're going to go out there and try to dominate. So this has been Abil Mehari, representing MehariNation Sports Podcast. Salute to the entire LDBC, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody.